No secret, I guess, that the Green Party will be voting against this bill at the third reading stage. I'm not going to repeat the arguments that I've made through the various stages of the bill, but rather just to touch on them and then build somewhat. In the committee stage, I spent most of my time working through the various ways in which this bill erodes the Woodhouse principles. And I would have to say that I agree with the analysis that Marion Street has just presented on that. The bill certainly erodes the principles upon which our ACC scheme is based. It cuts back on entitlements and in my view, and the view of the Green Party, actually goes back on the deal that the government made with the New Zealand population at the time that the right to sue was given up. So that was the focus of my comments at the committee stage. In the second reading stage, I focused on an area where, in fact, the Green Party has a different analysis, I think, to every other party in this House, and that's on the issue of the funding basis for ACC. Other parties support full funding for ACC. The Green Party supports pay-as-you-go funding. We say, why would you choose this one area, ACC, of government activity to fund in a full funding way when all of the other areas, education, social welfare, health, we actually fund on a pay-as-you-go basis? And if we look at the nature of the costs associated with accident compensation, rehabilitation and injury prevention, the nature of those costs in the future are not different to the nature of the costs that will be faced in the health sector, for example. So there is no argument that is sound for actually using a different method for paying for the scheme, except one. This one rationale is the rationale that we believe that government has chosen to use this approach to funding, and that is by using full funding as the funding mechanism for the scheme. It makes the scheme more like a suite of insurance schemes or insurance policies. And by doing that, it enables the product of ACC to be comparable to those of commercial insurance companies, and that will enable, first of all, competition from the private sector and then ultimately privatisation of ACC. We believe that's the agenda. I have to say, in the second reading debate, it was heartening on one hand to hear from the Māori Party that the Māori Party will now be voting against this bill, and it's heartening because the bill is a bad one and it should be opposed. On the other hand, it's a double-edged sword because by the Māori Party voting against the bill, the government will now be relying on the ACT Party for its support. And I think we all know in this House and outside the House what the price of that will be. That actually a government that campaigned and said that there will be no privatisation, no competition in the first term of government, will now be reluctantly forced to the point of saying, well, in order to get ACT support, we're going to have to move on that competition now instead. So, sir, it's a double-edged sword, but I welcome the Māori Party to the righteous side of the issue. So I want to draw a quick parallel with a couple of other areas. The health portfolio is one of mine, and I've pointed out in debates on health, for example, that the government in requiring DHBs to contract out more surgery to the private sector is in fact doing something that will draw specialised staff from the public sector into the private sector, thus undermining the capacity of the public sector and leading towards greater privatisation in the health sector. In the education sector, drawing a parallel with the United States, national standards are a precursor to vouchers, and vouchers presage privatisation in education. So what we're seeing is actually a change from the government's first year of office, where I think there were, it's fair to say, from right across the community, many criticisms of the government, saying this is a government that is just engaging in a a grab bag of unconnected populist issues. So that's what people were saying in the first year. Maybe that was a fair criticism. But now we start to see a program. And we start to see a program that right across the range of social services sees a withdrawal of this government from the role that the state has played. It's a government that has an agenda of a smaller state and a bigger role for the private sector. Now, sir, I think it's no secret that the Green Party stands on the other side of the line on that debate. But I recognise that it's a legitimate political philosophy to say that the state should be minimal, that social services should be provided by the private sector. If that's the philosophy that the National Party wants to espouse, well, it should do. But, sir, my objection to that is that what we're seeing is that philosophy and that approach emerging by stealth here in the second year of their term. It is not a basis on which they went to the population. And so what I would ask is that actually it should be. What I want to do now is to draw on some comments from former Prime Minister of this country, Michael Joseph Savage. When Savage was defending the Social Security Act across the House from attacks from opponents, he said this. He said, "The honourable gentleman," in those days of course it was, "on the opposition benches want to turn back the clocks. I want to know why people should not have security, why people should not have security in the evening of their days or when they are invalided." Always a word that I've struggled with, sir. What is there more important in Christianity than to be our brother's keepers in reality? Sir, I'm not a Christian, I think as members of the House know. But I would substitute my own version of the latter part of that statement and say, what is there more important in being part of a society than in taking a collective social responsibility for one another? And so that was one of the principles upon which the ACC scheme found its origins, one of the bases on which New Zealanders gave up their right to sue. And sir, I say this bill, this approach to ACC represents a fundamental derogation of those principles, and I say the Green Party stands instead for a fair go for all. Thank you, sir.
Speaker.